winning. Allocation is the bourbon industry's greatest magic trick. It convinces you that scarcity equals quality, and that if you just hunt hard enough, you will find the bottle that justifies the chase. But federal law defines quality in bourbon. It is written into the Code of Regulations. The standards are public. You do not need a treasure map. You need to know what the labels actually mean and which game is worth playing. 5 things about allocated bourbon that will change how you shop starting today. Number 1. What allocated actually means and why the term is designed to confuse you. If you search the federal alcohol regulations for the word allocated, you will find nothing. It does not exist as a legal term. It is not defined by the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. It is not part of any standard of identity. Allocated is a marketing term that individual retailers and distributors use to describe their internal inventory decisions. That is it. One store calls a bottle allocated because they only received 12 cases and they want to create urgency. Another store has 6 pallets of the same bourbon sitting in the back, but the manager puts it behind the counter and tells you it is allocated so he can upsell you on something else first. A third store genuinely received limited stock, but uses the word to justify pricing it at double MSRP. All 3 scenarios use the same word. None of them are lying in a legal sense because the word has no legal meaning. This is not how other regulated products work. Organic has a federal definition. Bottled in bond has a federal definition. Straight bourbon whiskey has 5 specific legal requirements that every distillery must follow, or they cannot use the term. But allocated means whatever the person holding the bottle wants it to mean that day. It is the retail equivalent of a magic 8-ball. The result is that you are being trained to chase scarcity instead of quality. You see the word allocated, and your brain assumes rare equals good. But bourbon that is hard to find is not automatically better than bourbon sitting on the shelf. Sometimes it is genuinely limited because the distillery makes very little. Sometimes it is artificially limited because creating a wait list drives demand. And sometimes it is not limited at all. It is just locked behind a counter because theatrics sell bottles. If you dislike the treasure hunt, the solution is simple. Ignore allocation claims entirely and buy based on what is actually in the bottle using the legal definitions that follow. If you love the hunt, at least know you are playing a retailer game, not a quality ranking. Number 2. Bottled in bond is the single most underrated allocation backdoor in American whiskey. This is a federal designation, created in 1897, and it is still one of the most transparent quality markers you can find on a bourbon label. The rules are in Title 27 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 5.88. 4 requirements, no exceptions. The whiskey must be distilled by one distiller at one distillery during one distilling season. A distilling season is January 1st through June 30th, or July 1st through December 31st. It must be aged at least 4 years in a federally bonded warehouse. It must be bottled at exactly 100 proof. Nothing can be added. No coloring, no flavoring, no blending with neutral spirits. What you are drinking is whiskey from one place, one time, 1 barrel entry proof, aged longer than the 2-year minimum for straight bourbon, and bottled at a proof high enough to carry real flavor. Bottled in bond is not a gimmick. It is a federal standard that forces transparency. If a distillery labels something bonded, they are putting their name on a product that meets those 4 rules, and the TTB will pull the label if they lie. Compare that to the word allocated, which could mean 6 bottles or 6,000. The beauty of bottled in bond is that it eliminates variables. You know the age floor, you know the proof. You know it came from one production run, which means consistency across bottles. Because the standard is over a century old, It predates the modern hype cycle. Distilleries do not get to invent a new bonded story every year. They either follow the law or they do not use the term. Some of the best values in bourbon right now are bonded bottles sitting on shelves that people walk past because they are not allocated. Old Forester 100 proof bonded, Heaven Hill bonded, even some store-picked single barrels labeled bonded if you are in a state that allows them. These run $25 to $50 depending on your market, and they will outperform many allocated bottles at twice the price because the liquid is protected by law, not by hype. When you pour a bonded bourbon, you are tasting a decision the distillery made to meet a standard instead of chasing a trend. The 100 proof delivers heat but not harshness. The 4-year minimum means the oak has time to work. And the single season requirement means every bottle from that batch came from the same whiskey, not a blend designed to taste like nothing, so it offends nobody. If you are tired of chasing ghosts, start with bonded. It is the most honest label in bourbon. Number 3. Buffalo Trace Antique Collection is the test of whether you understand release cycles or just follow crowds. In 2025, the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection celebrated its 25th anniversary and added a 6th expression for the first time since 2006. That 6th bottle is E.H. Taylor Bottled in Bond Bourbon. The collection now includes 6 whiskeys released every fall, typically in September or October, depending on distribution timing. The manufacturer's suggested retail price is around $125 per bottle. Secondary market pricing regularly hits $500 or more. This is where you learn whether allocation is about quality or about game theory. The antique collection is genuinely limited. Buffalo Trace does not make infinite barrels of George T. Stagg or William LaRue Weller every year. The whiskey is real, the age statements are real, and the production constraints are real. But scarcity does not mean you should pay secondary prices. It means you need to know when the game is worth playing. Every fall, the same thing happens. Retailers get their allocation in waves. The first wave goes to VYP customers or loyalty programs. The second wave gets raffled or put behind spending minimums. The third wave, if there is one, hits shelves for about 90 seconds before it is gone. If you are not on a list, you are not getting BTAC at the manufacturer's suggested retail price unless you walk into a store at the exact right moment, or you live in a control state with a functioning lottery system. So the question is not whether BTAC is good. The question is whether you are willing to play the fall release lottery every year, and whether you will pay secondary when you lose. Here is what most people miss. The addition of E.H. Taylor Bottled in Bond to the collection in 2025 is a signal. Buffalo Trace is expanding the antique collection for the first time in nearly 20 years. They are not doing that because they have surplus whiskey. They are doing it because demand is high enough to justify adding another limited SKU to the lineup. That means the game is only going to get more competitive. More bottles in the collection does not mean more access. It means more entries in the same lottery with the same odds. If you are going to chase BTAC, set rules now. Decide your manufacturer's suggested retail price ceiling. Mark the fall release window on your calendar. Sign up for retailer notifications if your state allows them. But do not convince yourself that paying $500 for a bottle with a $125 manufacturer's suggested retail price is justified just because it is hard to find. There are barrel-proof bourbons on shelves right now at $80 to $100 that will give you a similar experience without the treasure hunt. The antique collection is the bourbon equivalent of courtside seats. If you can get them at face value, great. If you are paying scalper prices, you are funding the secondary market, not drinking better whiskey. If you are tired of feeling like bourbon shopping is a part-time job, subscribe to this channel. We break down which bottles are worth the hunt and which ones are designed to waste your time and money every single week. No hype, no sponsored fluff, just the truth about what is in the glass. Hit subscribe right now so you stop overpaying and start drinking better. Let us keep going. Number 4. Pappy Van Winkle is the bourbon that teaches you the difference between legacy and liquid. The Van Winkle collection includes some of the most discussed allocated bourbons in America. Pappy Van Winkle 23 year. Old Rip Van Winkle 25 year. The younger expressions in the family. Buffalo Trace describes them as highly sought-after releases, which is the understatement of the decade. The manufacturer's suggested retail price ranges from around $300 for the younger bottles to $3,000 for the oldest expressions, depending on the age statement. Secondary market pricing runs $2,000 to 5 figures. Auctions consistently show Pappy bottles selling for 10 to 20 times suggested retail. The Associated Press has documented cases in control states where demand for Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year-old, contributed to illegal distribution schemes and ethical violations by state employees who controlled access. This is where allocation stops being about whiskey and becomes about wealth signaling. Pappy is a good bourbon. It is wheated, it is aged longer than almost anything else on the market, and the Van Winkle family name carries real history. But there is no bourbon on earth worth $5,000 if you are drinking it. At that price, you are buying a story to tell at parties. You are buying the label. You are buying proof that you won the lottery, or knew the right person, or paid enough to skip the line. The liquid cannot justify it. Blind tastings consistently show that experienced bourbon drinkers cannot reliably pick Pappy out of a lineup against other wheated bourbons at a tenth of the price. The flavor profile is excellent, but it is not 10 times better than Maker's Mark Cask Strength. It is not 20 times better than Larceny Barrel Proof. When you actually taste Pappy, you get soft wheat sweetness, vanilla that feels almost delicate, and oak that whispers instead of shouts after 2 decades in the barrel. It is refined. It is smooth. But smooth is not the same as transcendent. The whiskey tastes expensive because you know it is expensive. Strip the label off and pour it blind next to a $30 wheated bourbon, and the gap shrinks fast. If you find Pappy at the manufacturer's suggested retail price, buy it. Drink it. Enjoy the experience. But if you are paying secondary market prices, you are not a whiskey enthusiast. You are a collector gambling that the next buyer will pay even more. And the secondary market only works as long as people keep believing the story. The moment the hype cracks, those $5,000 bottles become $300 bottles that nobody wants to open because they overpaid. Pappy teaches you that allocation is not about quality. It is about constructed scarcity and the willingness of buyers to compete for status. If you dislike wheated bourbon or high age statements, you are not missing anything by skipping Pappy. And if you do love wheated bourbon, there are bottles sitting on shelves right now that will give you 90% of the experience at 5% of the cost. Number 5. Barrel proof and cask strength are not marketing terms. They are federally regulated labels, and they tell you exactly how honesty a distillery is being. Title 27 of the Code of Federal Regulations defines when you can use the terms barrel proof or cask strength on a bourbon label. The rule is simple. The bottling proof cannot be more than 2 proof degrees lower than the proof of the whiskey when it was dumped from the barrel. That is it. If the distillery dumps barrels at 120 proof and bottles at 118 proof, they can call it barrel proof. If they dump at 120 and bottle at 115, they cannot. The 2-degree rule exists because some proof loss happens during filtering and bottling. But it is tight enough that barrel proof actually means something. It means the distillery is giving you the whiskey at nearly the same strength it came out of the barrel. No water added, beyond the bare minimum for bottling logistics. No dilution to stretch the whiskey into more bottles. That distinction is transparent. This is the opposite of how most bourbon gets bottled. Standard bourbon is dumped from barrels anywhere from 100 to 130 proof, then cut with water down to 80 or 90 proof before bottling. That water does not improve the whiskey. It increases the bottle count per barrel, and more bottles per barrel means more revenue per barrel. Barrel-proof bourbon makes the opposite decision. The distillery is leaving money on the table by not watering it down. That is why barrel-proof bottles cost more. You are paying for the whiskey the distillery chose not to stretch. And because the proof stays high, the flavor stays concentrated. You get more oak, more spice, more caramel, more of everything the barrel contributed because it has not been diluted into oblivion. The result is bolder, more expressive flavor. The best part about barrel-proof labeling is that it forces transparency. If a distillery wants to use those words, they have to follow the 2-degree rule. If they do not want to follow the rule, they have to call it something vague like high proof or full flavor, which tells you nothing. When you see barrel proof or cask strength on a label, you know 3 things immediately. The distillery is not watering down this expression. The proof is within 2 degrees of barrel dump. And the TTB verified that claim before approving the label. That verification matters. It means the label cannot lie. Some of the most reliable bottles in bourbon right now are barrel-proof releases that do not get allocated. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, Larceny Barrel Proof, Old Forester 105 or 115 depending on the batch. Maker's Mark Cask Strength. These run $50 to $90 depending on your market and the batch. They sit on shelves because they are not hyped, but they are legally protected. If you dislike high proof, this category is not for you. Barrel-proof bourbon typically runs between 110 and 130 proof. That is strong enough to need water or ice for most drinkers. But if you like bold flavors and you are tired of chasing allocated bottles, barrel-proof expressions are your shortcut. They are the rare case where a premium product is actually transparent about what you are paying for. First, stop chasing allocation lists and start reading labels. If a bottle says bottled in bond, you know it is aged at least 4 years and bottled at 100 proof. If it says barrel proof or cask strength, you know it is within 2 degrees of dump proof and not watered down. Those are federal standards. They cannot be faked. Second, set a hard ceiling for secondary market pricing and do not break it. Decide right now what you will pay over MSRP and stick to that number. If Pappy is $1,000 on the secondary market and your ceiling is $200, walk away. The bourbon will not taste 5 times better just because someone else paid 5 times more. Third, treat fall release season like a lottery, not a guarantee. Mark your calendar for Buffalo Trace Antique Collection drops in September or October. Sign up for retailer alerts if your state allows it. But if you do not get picked, do not pay scalper prices out of frustration. There are barrel-proof bottles on shelves every day that will give you a comparable experience without the treasure hunt. Allocation is a game. The house sets the rules. The only way to win is to know when the game is worth playing and when you are better off walking out of the casino.